to carry of allegiance. Mr. King.
Let us pray. So, Father, we just thank you for this day. Thank you for the sunshine. Thank you for this community. Lord, just thank you for your blessings upon it. And Lord, I just pray, God, that you would guide and direct us in all that we do. And all that we say is we take up the business of the city. Lord, we thank you for this day, God, that we also get out and exercise our right to vote. I just thank you, Lord, for those freedoms. Be with us and guide us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you for being here. It was a beautiful day today. I mean, good grief, could it be any prettier out there? So thank you for exiting the pretty day into this conference room, and we'll get through this city council meeting. Before we go too much further, I would like to acknowledge that Councilmember Mitchell is on a Zoom call on a phone pointed directly at me, so she's going to have to stare at me for a while, so I'm sorry. Thank you for being here. I just wanted to acknowledge that so you will see her votes popping up here when we do get to a vote. Is she voting electronically from remotely?
I sent her with a Chromebook.
Technology, that's pretty cool.
Don't we have to see her?
I can see her.
Okay. Oh, right on.
And we're good with that? Scott says we're good with that, so we're good with that. I'm getting a weird echo, and maybe that's just me. All right, you guys are looking at me like I'm crazy, so I'll just live with it. Here we go. I would like to open it up for citizen participation. Anyone wishing to speak to anything not on the agenda, please come to the podium, announce your name, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I won't take 5 minutes. I actually like to introduce myself. My name is Alan Isett, and I'm the recently appointed Collector of Revenue for Greene County. So now you can put a name and a face together. Hopefully you'll never have problems with your either real estate or personal property taxes in Greene County. But if you do, I'm the guy or the office in which you need to contact. So
Excellent. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
thank you. If you don't mind, I'd like to just hand out business cards to some of the
Please.
council members so you have a name and easier to hand that out. So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Isett. I appreciate you coming in and introducing yourself. Any other citizens wishing to speak to anything not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none others, I will close citizen participation. Moving on to the consent agenda, I need a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda.
Motion.
Second. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Just throw something at me if she says no. Moving on to the boards, commissions, and committee schedule, we have a planning and zoning meeting April 12th, 2021. City council meetings on April 20th, 2021 and May 4th, 2021. And finally, a board of adjustments meeting on May 6th, 2021. Moving on to old business and tabled items, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-12 by title only.
Motion. Second.
We've got motions and seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, calling an election on the question of imposing a city sales tax to fund public safety, designating the time for holding said election, and authorizing and directing the city clerk to give notice to the county clerks of said election.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Cameron was here and gave a very lengthy, well, not very lengthy. It was lengthy. It was lengthy. Presentation about this issue. Mr. Cameron, do you have any updates that you would like to update City Council with?
No, nothing that we didn't present at the council meeting or either of the work sessions.
Excellent. City Council, anybody wishing to have conversation before we move to a vote? All right. Seeing none, I need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 21-12.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. We are now going to take a roll call vote. This is going to be done electronically on our computers. So please go to refresh. Cast your vote. Submit your vote. And wait. Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item number 4 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-13 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the municipal code of the City of Republic, Missouri by amending Title IV, Land Use, Chapter 405, Zoning Regulations, Article 1, in general, and Article 3, Zoning Districts, Use and Regulations regarding definitions, and C1 and C2 zoning.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Haynes was here last time and gave a presentation. Are there any updates from staff? Any conversation or comments from council? Seeing none, we will move forward. I need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 21-13.
Motion.
Okay. Motion and a second. We are now going to take an electronic roll call vote on our computers. Hit refresh, cast your vote, hit submit vote, and we will wait.
You voted? Any Mrs. Poole?
Mrs. Poole, I think, did you hit submit vote? Did you hit submit vote? I think we're waiting on you for the roll call vote.
Oh. I was doing the other thing.
Oh, yeah, multiple things. Have you voted?
Councilmember Poole?
Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item number 5 on the agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-14 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the municipal code of the City of Republic, Missouri by amending Title IV, Land Use, Chapter 405, Zoning Regulations, Article 4, a Plan Development District regarding Plan Development Districts.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Haynes, you presented last time. Are there any updates from city staff? Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, we will move to a electronic. Oh, I need a motion and a second for final passage of Bill 21-14.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. We're now going to take a roll call vote on our computers. So we click refresh, cast your vote, hit submit vote, and we will wait. Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item number 6 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-15 by title only.
Motion. Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the municipal code of the City of Republic, Missouri by amending Title IV, Land Use, Chapter 415, Sign Regulations regarding signs.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Haynes was here last time. Any updates from staff? Seeing none, any questions or comments from council? Excellent. We will move on to a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 21-15.
Motion. Second.
We've got a motion and a second. We will now take an electronic roll call vote. Please click refresh, cast your vote, and then hit submit vote, and we will wait. Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item number 7 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-16 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, approving amending the zoning code and official map by changing the classification of approximately 8.44 acres from agricultural AG and general commercial C3 to general commercial C2, located at the southeast corner of State Highway MM and West Farm Road 148.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Haynes was here last time giving us an update on this. Any updates now? Excellent. Any discussion or comments from council? Seeing none, I need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 21-16.
Motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. We are now going to take a roll call vote on our computers. So hit refresh. Voting's open. Cast your vote. Hit submit vote. And we wait. Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item number 8 on our agenda. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-17 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Berry Tractor and Equipment for the purchase of a 2018 Komatsu excavator and a 2016 Komatsu dozer, and further authorizing the city administrator to execute the necessary documents to obtain financing on said equipment from Bank of Missouri.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Davis and Ms. Parks gave a presentation on this last time. Any updates from staff? Excellent. Any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, I need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 21-17.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. We're now going to take a roll call vote, so hit refresh on your computers. Voting is open. Cast your vote. And don't forget to hit submit vote. Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to number 9 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-18 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
Is it something I'm saying? We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk, maybe it's something you're saying, Laura.
I know, right? An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending Title I, Government Code, Chapter 110, Administration Policies, Article 2, Purchasing and Surplus Property, and adopting a new policy entitled City of Republic's Purchasing Policy and Procedure.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff? Thank you, ma'am. Any questions or discussions from council? Seeing none, I need a motion and a second for a final passage of Bill 21-18, please.
Motion. Second.
It's the please. That's what it is.
Yes.
Thank you. I've learned something. I need to say please. All right. We've got a motion and a second. We will take a roll call vote now, so please click refresh on your computers. Cast your vote, and then say submit vote. Motion carries 8-0. Moving on to item number 10 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 21-19 by title only, please.
Motion. Second.
We found it. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the Employee Handbook.
Thank you.
Short.
I'm going to focus again. Sorry. All right. So, any updates from staff? Thank you, ma'am. Any questions or discussion from council? Seeing none, I now need a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 21-19, please.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. We will now move to a roll call vote on our computers. Please click refresh, cast your vote, hit submit vote, and we will wait. Motion carries 8-0. We now move to the new business section. This is a public hearing, so please remember I mess these up 90% of the time, so we're going to go slow and pay attention to this. By we, I mean me. At this time, I will open up the public hearing on the matter of setting and adjusting sewer rates. The way this public hearing will be conducted will be each individual who wishes to address council on this matter will be given 5 minutes to speak. We will start with those in opposition and then move to those in favor. If there is anyone who wishes to speak to the council in opposition of this matter, please approach the podium and you will be given 5 minutes to speak. Andrew, now's your chance. All right. If there is anyone wishing to speak in favor of this matter, please approach the podium and you will be given 5 minutes to speak. Seeing none who wish to speak on this matter, I will now close the public hearing and move into number 12 on our agenda. I need a motion and a second for the first read of Bill 21-20 by title only. Please.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, amending the municipal code of the City of Republic, Missouri by amending Title 8 fees regarding sewer rates.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Nelson's here to give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just real quick before I go through the slides, I wanted to mention a couple of things. I went back through all the presentations I've done, the study sessions, all the times that the council's actually listened to what we had to say about the wastewater, and I learned a couple of things. One, I'm an incredibly boring speaker, so I apologize for that. I'll move quickly tonight, but I want to be thorough. The second thing was, I don't know that I did a great job at any point in time setting up for the mentality behind the decisions that we made, because it would be easy for me to stand here and tell you that Burns and Mac did all this work. It's their plan. They're telling us we have to raise the rates. That's what we have to do. That's really not the case, because the decisions really were made by staff, and we took kind of 3 principal priorities for every decision point that we came to, and all those decisions we made along the way. So the first one being compliance. We don't have a choice about being compliant. The state makes us do that. So that's number 1. Number 2 is impact to our users. So every decision we make, we really look back and say, okay, what is the impact to our ratepayer? What is the impact to our user? What is the impact to a new business locating in Republic? And the last one being growth and development. The decisions we make, how it will impact our ability to serve new growth and new development. And the reason I bring that up is because it's kind of like a balancing act when you go through this process of master planning for your utility. You can't really focus on one and not super impact the other. So if we only took compliance into the equation, then our ratepayers would probably suffer a little bit more, and growth and development would for sure suffer, because we would stop growth and development and just become compliant. Same thing if we only look at our ratepayer and say we're going to net zero impact our ratepayer, then we stifle growth and development, but we also probably struggle with compliance. So that's the reason I bring that up before we go through this. Keep that in mind. That's kind of our guiding principle for the whole process that we've been through so far. Just real quick, I want to go back through the history of the wastewater system in the Republic, at least back to '99 when the voters.
Andrew, we use the mic. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, can't hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So, back in '99, the voters approved the first series of bonds for the wastewater plant improvements. Those of you that remember that time frame, sorry, I'm like moving all around. I need somebody to follow me around with the mic. We went to the voters several times with a bunch of different plans. The city staff did. There was some iterations that had the plant located on the south side of town, and then the final iteration that put the plant where it is today. And that was actually the more expensive version of how to solve the wastewater problem at the time. So that was back in '99. In April of 2000, the EPA actually came out with a ruling that prohibited the bypass of your primary treatment, which is what we designed into the plant that we built back in '99. So in 2003, when we opened that plant, essentially we weren't compliant with EPA. Now, DNR is not just going to say, oh, all of a sudden you're non-compliant. There's a process to get compliant. And that's kind of where we started in the voluntary compliance agreement in 2011. So there was a period of time where you kind of police yourself, and then in 2011, DNR said, okay, you're not doing a great job of policing yourself. We're going to do a voluntary compliance agreement, give you 5 years to be compliant. The city at that point started investing $100,000 to $150,000 toward I&I, inflow and infiltration into the system, which is essentially rainwater entering our treatment system. And I've got, just real quick, this is kind of a simple breakdown of where I&I can come from, just so that everybody understands what we're fighting. So if you look at this slide, there's several points of inflow or infiltration demonstrated. You can have gutters, sump pumps, clean out valves, cracks in your lateral lines, cracks in your main, and then even cross connections between your storm sewer, your inlet boxes, and your actual wastewater lines. And what happens is when it rains, we see all of that water make it to our plant, and we have to treat it. Last point on the timeline, 2016, we were granted an extension on the voluntary compliance agreement. We had taken steps toward compliance, but I wouldn't say that we made any major progress. So they extended it in 2016, and we've still kind of been on the same process up until, sorry, let me go through this. Let me back up. So when we're talking about I&I do want to talk about where I&I is a big problem in the city. We did some modeling of the system with Burns and Mac, and it actually showed us where the most rainfall was entering our system. So you can see that in this map, it really points to the oldest parts of town, which is not uncommon for a community for old aging systems to start to break down and rainwater to be able to make it into the system. And then you have the older homes where there was a process by which you were allowed to actually connect your either gutters or sump pumps to the wastewater collection system. So that's kind of our target for I&I improvement. At the plant, what happens during a rainfall event is usually it takes about an inch in a very short period of time, but you'll see on the top of this slide our normal treatment process. So it enters the plant, it goes through all those treatment processes, and then eventually through the UV treatment and out to the losing stream. When it rains, we cannot process that much water, so we go to the stormwater clarifier and we detain as much as we can until a point that we actually have to lose from there directly into the stream. That's bypassing. That's just kind of a simple schematic of what it looks like when it makes it to the plant. And then this last one, just kind of covering I&I so that the council understands where we're going with this. This is one of those flow monitoring areas in the older part of town, FM 109, which is generally probably from Main Street to the west down to like Kansas area. You can see in the chart, and I'm going to step up here actually, sorry I don't get away from the mic. You can see in this chart, right here it's telling us the age of our infrastructure and the percentage of that infrastructure in that area that is of a certain age. And you see the majority of the infrastructure in this area is from the 1950s. So that's kind of what we're battling when we talk about I&I. You're going back to the vitrified clay pipe, a lot of materials that are broken down over time, roots breaking down, and so the rainwater is just draining into our system and making it all the way to the plant. What Burns and Mac provided us was a very detailed plan of how we go about finding I&I in our system, the costs associated, and a target goal of reduction. So we actually know, we can tell DNR, this is our target of gallons of I&I that we will produce via these projects. So in each one of those areas that are targeted, I&I has a plan just like that. So when we talk about $36 million investment in the near term in the wastewater system, these projects are part of that. The wastewater treatment plant itself is just a big part of that, a bigger portion of it, but there are projects like this one to the tune of about $1 million that are also included in that effort. Just real quick, 2017, you're all aware, we started the master plans. 2019, the council approved those. In 2020, we traveled to Jeff City and we sat down with DNR. We produced these plans. We said to them, this is our plan. This is our pathway to compliance, knowing that our VCA is going to expire in October of this year. Just to make them aware of what our plan was, they were favorable to that discussion. So earlier this year, council authorized to ask for an administrative order, which is a stepped up version of the voluntary compliance agreement that we are already in. So with the administrative order, it can carry penalties, but it also establishes a very definitive timeline for you to be compliant. And we're in the process now of negotiating that with DNR. So before we ever enter into that administrative order, because it's with consent, the council will see those agreements and we'll actually ask you to approve that, and we'll execute that with the MDNR. Where we're at today, as I mentioned, we're negotiating with MDNR for the enforcement side of compliance. On the financial side, the council's authorized us to go after the certificates of participation for the improvements of the, or I would call it private side, but I know that's not the correct term. Debbie will tell me that's not the correct term, but other funding than government funding to secure those improvements. We need to implement the appropriate rates to fund those improvements and then move on to construction. So you all have a copy of the rate study that we did, that Burns and Mack conducted for us, but I want to hit a few of the highlights there. Industry trends. So water and sewer are among the most expensive utilities when you look at cost over time. So in the rate study, you'll see a comparison of utility rates versus the CPI. So industry-wide, nationwide, water and sewer are increasing about 4.9% in cost to deliver to the community every year, whereas you see CPI at like 2.6%, 2.1%, depending on which source you look to. So I did want to highlight that. Some of the factors that are causing those increasing costs are the increasing regulatory requirements. So depending on administration, new developments in technology, you're seeing increased water quality standards that have a direct effect on the cost at the treatment plant to actually produce those water quality standards. And then it's kind of like the gas tax discussion. People are installing more efficient fixtures. They're more mindful of water conservation. So it's kind of like the more fuel efficient cars. You see less actual revenue on the roads because of those cars. So similar situation there. The rate study itself, we look at 20-year projections on both revenues and costs of the O&M, which is just our general operations and maintenance and upkeep of the system. And it also looks at that 20-year CIP that we approved in the master plan. And this is where I have to really, shout out to Debbie, because when you get into a rate study with a bunch of financial planners and you're an engineer, you're like, what? Compound this and all this. Debbie really led that discussion, and we think we got to a really great place in the rate study. History on rates. There was a large rate increase back in 2001 after the vote where we decided to build the plant on the north side of town. We established that system and what it was going to cost, and there was a large rate increase at that time. And then between now and then, there was a periodic increase by council over time. And then the last official action that the council made was in 2009, which actually adjusted our rates for a 5-year period ending in 2014. So we haven't actually addressed the rates since 2014. And part of that is because I think, when Mr. Cameron took the job, he said we've got to evaluate what our systems cost us to deliver before we can make an intelligent decision on what the rates should be. So even though we knew based on industry standards that you should be addressing rates every year, I don't think it wasn't appropriate to increase the rates to some arbitrary amount, not knowing what the actual cost of the system was. So in 2017, we separated those funds. We started evaluating each fund individually and what it cost to deliver those utilities, and then we started the whole master planning process. Rate study, I pretty much went through that. That's kind of where we're at on the rate discussion. So the rate study that Burns and Mac provided, it is the balanced version of what we asked for. So there's a lot of scenarios that you can do when you talk about a rate increase. You can do the Band-Aid shock and awe. You can do incremental evenly over time, or you can somewhere in between where the first 2 years are a little bit more, and then you step it out to an even increase, a more even, not even, but more consistent increase over time. So that's kind of where we're at. I think when you look at the percentage of increase that we're talking about versus just industry standard of what it costs to deliver the systems, and then knowing that we haven't adjusted it since 2014, so 7 years, it's within the realm of what we think is reasonable for a system like ours. This slide represents our total utility bill relative to other communities. You'll see that the dashed line here is where we're at today relative to these other communities, and then this is where we'll be. And this black line is the average across all of the communities in our region. And I will say, Springfield's on here twice because they're raising their rates. What's not shown is that Willard, Stratford, Battlefield also, because they're tied to Springfield, they're also increasing their rates. So I suspect that our overall position would stay relatively close to the same as far as the overall utility bill. I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I won't be back next year telling you that we're going to have to increase the water rates too. I mean, it's industry is showing us that the cost to deliver these utilities is increasing every year.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Can you go back to that slide?
Yeah.
So we've talked about it. I mentioned it when Debbie's done the financials. If you look at that blue piece of it, you can see that, just to clarify, Andrew, the rate has not gone up since 2014, but the last time this council voted on a rate increase was actually 2009, because that language carried it out to 2014. So technically there's been no vote regarding the rates for 12 years.
Correct.
Correct?
Yep.
So the interesting piece of it is you see that small margin of what the blue is. I believe the reason why the city has chosen not to address their water rates is because they combined the funds, so you would never really see that disparity. So when we broke the funds apart in 2017 to show you, so when you look at the last financials, I believe there was $87,000 or right at around $100,000 in the water fund. Technically, that's not 110 days operating cash. So that blue line has got to be improved as well, but I can almost anticipate that was somewhat suppressed because the price, because I've heard it since I got here, our sewer rates are higher than everyone else. But when the citizens voted to move it on the north side of town, that's what prompted the reason for the rate increase the way it is. So the blue line is not, those should be equal or closer to. And so I just want to point that out, that's something we've been talking about when we go through the financials, that the water is lacking. I think that graph right there shows you we're at probably one of the lowest on water revenue.
Yeah, and this one is just sewer. So you can see that we're on further to the right when it comes to just sewer. This does not include where other communities are also increasing their sewer. Like I said, I know of probably half a dozen that are doing the same thing that we're doing tonight. So probably going to stay relatively in the same position there as well. The last piece is, and you're always hesitant to tell an individual exactly what it'll mean for their individual bill, but I try to break it down based on the best representation of our system that we have. So on the far left side, that would represent a small user using 2,000 gallons. The bar on the left is existing, so $21, and the immediate increase would make it $24. In the middle, more of a medium user, 3,500, which is actually what an average user is in our system. You're going from, sorry, I can't do that.
35 to 41.
35 to 41. And then on the large user, and this is an average of large users, so there are some users that are much larger than 8,000, an increase from 77 to 91, I believe.
So can I interrupt?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know how many gallons of water I use a month. So, like, what's a 2 kids, 3 bedroom, 2 bath house without a sprinkler system versus, like, can you answer that?
I can. Standard for a family of 4 and a 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom, probably 4 to 5,000 gallons.
Okay. So the small users would be like apartment users or somebody like that?
The small users are typically your senior community apartments or single person households, or just 2-person households.
And the large, are they the commercial users? Who would be a large user?
You do see some residential in the large category, depending on how many people are in their home, but generally, yes, the commercial. But amongst our largest users, you're talking about restaurants, and then
School district.
people, industries like McLean, the bigger employee centers that we have here in Republic.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry, I just
But great question.
tried to put a face to them.
100 gallons per person per day is how we kind of estimate.
Okay.
That's it. Any questions I can answer on that? I know I've only been up here 3 years telling you about wastewater and all those things. I hope I covered it well.
So I'm going to ask a question, and I would like you to go back to the slide where it's got the curvy lines, the 3 parts. It's back in the first third of your presentation. And I've asked you this each time you've been up there, but I'm going to try this one. I've asked you this multiple times before, and you've told me no every time, but I'm interested to know if there's a different way of asking it that might get to a yes. So the enforcement part, the administrative order, where we go and say, hey, look, we know we're not in compliance, but we really want to be. Is there a way to stretch out a timeline to make it easier on the citizens to pass those increases over a slower period of time? Can we negotiate a better administrative order for us?
No, but let me elaborate.
Thank you.
So
You see what I'm getting at, though,
Yeah.
right? Is there a way to make it go longer
Yeah.
so that we can be cheaper?
I couldn't tell you across the board what the average is for an AOC, but in our discussions 2 weeks ago with the MDNR, that's kind of our first effort to sit down and collectively say, what does this thing need to look like? 3 years was going to be a stretch for them. And I can tell you that just in the amount of improvements that we're proposing, 3 years is kind of tight for us. But 3 years is amongst the longer AOCs that they would do.
Do they have examples of other cities that have been in similar situations, and have you seen that they've stretched it to 5 or 7 years for them? And if so, how did they get there, and can we do that?
I don't know of anybody going beyond 3 years, but if we negotiate the AOC to say 3 years, or best case scenario 4 years, and we don't meet compliance, they look to see that you are making tremendous amounts of progress. And by tremendous, I mean tremendous amounts of effort and progress, expense, and they will grant you an extension of the AOC. But there has to be a clear demonstration that you have expended the effort to actually be compliant. And for us, that's what these rates are allowing us to do.
So Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I think to that point, they would suggest you had 5 years to demonstrate that you were going to get there. You had another 5 years. I think that when they give you 10 years in advance and they don't see that type of movement, I really do believe that I've never, in my career just dealing with environmental, I've never seen a compliance schedule go beyond 3 years. Because a lot of times, the reason why the CPI is lagging behind the cost is, like you said, environmental regulation. But you're usually given 3 years to get it done. I mean, that's pretty much going to be the window. But before they bring the hammer down and you try to make the good faith, I mean, but you'd probably be 25 million into it before they'd say, okay, we see what you're doing versus 100 to 150,000 a year. I think that's what they would suggest, is you had 10 years to get there and you didn't. So we were kind of pushed into this position. And now with the new administration, the environmental policy is a lot stronger.
That's all I've got. Anybody else on the council?
Mr. Mayor? Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
What is our percentage that we use of that for compliance? If you could put just like a
So let me go big picture. So we're going backwards because of the short timeline that we have to gain compliance than a normal process. So normal, we had 10 years, you would attack system I&I because the rainwater's coming in out in your city. It's not showing up at the plant, it's coming in out in your city, so you go out and you seek and destroy I&I in your system. It takes a long time because you actually got to find it. What we're doing is we're going to address the plant first so that we have the treatment method and capacity to handle the actual stormwater, and then go back to the I&I so we can make the deadline. And what that's doing is we're building the capacity relative to the projected growth of our city over the term of the debt for the wastewater treatment plant, so that we don't ever lose the capacity that we need to facilitate our growth, but we also address the compliance.
for that filtration.
Yeah, that's somewhat backwards, but the capacity we need to be compliant, I would tell you that probably just, this is rough, just kind of guess that we're 80% compliance and 20% growth as far as expenditures on this.
And do we expect those regulations to get more difficult and so we could be?
I think what we've done is we've got the best minds in Burns and Mack, and even the best in legal representation, looking ahead for us in future regulations. That's a discussion we actually had this morning. Was, are we setting ourselves up, maybe not spending enough or not planning for the right compliance in the near term? And I think we're in a good place. We're looking at all of the future requirements that are kind of in discussion. It takes EPA and MDNR to implement those. It'll take time. We're afforded opportunities to comment on that, but I think we're doing right by future requirements that we see, at least in the pipe.
Mr. Silva.
So I saw in your graph that Nixa was to the far left.
Yeah.
Did they do something different?
So what I can explain in other communities, and Branson would be another one that's far to the left. There are sewer and water districts that aren't represented in Branson here. That's, Branson, think small Branson, and then you've got this large area of sewer and water districts. What's not represented here is if other communities are using general funds to subsidize their improvements in either of the utilities to offset the cost. So if you're using SIST funds or general funds or whatever that is in your community to help with your cost of delivery of utilities, I wouldn't know that. I couldn't see that here, but it's possible that their plant's ideally located and everything just runs downhill and it's cheaper for them also. I doubt that that's the case.
Nixa also owns an electric utility.
Yeah, we spend about $500,000 in utility costs in our two electric only, just every year for electric. So.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
Just a couple softballs to bring this a little bit different. Andrew, during a rain event, during a normal day, how many gallons goes through the plant?
Too close to 2.
Okay, so during a rain event, what's that jump up to? So at just a half-inch rain, to give perspective, because I want to draw attention to what's really driving where we're at. What does that go up to during a half-inch rain event?
Depending on how fast it actually comes down, we could see 4 to 6 pretty easy. We can push, I want to say, Jason, 4.
Yeah.
We can push 4 before we actually have to go to the stormwater clarifier. And then it's really how much rain and how fast it comes, and then eventually you fill up your stormwater clarifier and we have to actually...
So it's a 100% increase, sometimes 200%.
4. It's 400. Our peaking factor is 4.
Right, but we go from 2 million a day to 4 million gallons a day.
Yeah, in a half-inch rain is like a 5-year event. in a 10-year event, the peaking factor doubles, which I'm not sure why they describe a 10-year rain event. We all know that those happen more frequently than 10 years,
But I want to address Mr. Franklin's comment about the compliance. So there are pieces of this that just a refresher, a year ago we went and met with DNR with our plan. And the question that I took with them was, what does the future look like when what they call total maximum daily load, which is a stream requirement of the receiving stream. So a lot of historical knowledge there, and I asked the question, what do we need to be prepared for compliance? Because that's a rainwater issue. But when you have what is a cleanliness issue, contaminants in the system, what are you guys looking at? What are you looking to impose upon us? It's something that's new, that's coming from federal regulation. Stormwater is one thing that every city, Springfield just passed a new agreement with DNR to extend their agreement out to something else because they had demonstrated over a certain period of time that they had moved forward, they'd raised rates in good faith. So they can extend them, but the thing about it is you got to spend a lot of money to do that. What the question that I had from them is, okay, say we spend the $20 million on the wastewater plant, are you going to add ammonia to the requirement? Are you going to change it to phosphorus? What's it going to be? And so listening to what those comments were, what I can safely tell you, and I'll put it on the record as from this, is that even after this plant changes and they go and say they want to add a different parameter to that, this plant is designed to actually be able to be utilized or fitted to address those needs, because really there's no other parameters or constituents other than metals, and that's a completely different animal. But I believe that this plant sets the city up, because that's the question we have is, well, how do we know, like learn from the past, the city designs it, approves it in 99, within 1 year they're not even compliant. So where did that get dropped? And so we have to make sure that whatever we're putting into our assets actually will get some life out of it for at least the 20 years before the rules change. But we are going about it completely backwards, because ideally, the permit, for those that don't know, you get a permit like a driver's license to have a wastewater plant. That driver's license allows you to put water in the creek. You don't just get to do it because you're a city. Every 5 years they go, okay, you got to go in, take a driver's test. Are you passing the test? Can you see what's in the sign? Hey, you're not doing it. We'll give you a few years to learn it. But that permit allows us to do it. So technically, the real problem is in our pipes, but the permit is at the plant. So they're saying, listen, you got to fix that problem, but we're going to, it could affect your permit. So technically, the last 10 years, what ideally would have been done, I don't want to live in the past, but to say if we'd have spent $20 million in the collection system over the last 10 years, most likely, we could have held off a little bit longer on the wastewater plant. Far more cost effective. It takes about $6 a gallon to build capacity. It's not near that much to replace the pipes. Now, woulda, shoulda, coulda, I can't promise that that's a fact, but I can say this, that we're going to have to be spending quite a bit of money in the collection system. The other piece that's in that for everyone is the Brookline bypass. This is another piece of information that's very interesting. When we consolidated Brookline, the system was not built to let Brookline go to McElhaney. McElhaney lift station was not designed to take in Brookline. So what happened is, instead of building that line to the plant, that plant was built into an overcapacity issue right now. So we're actually getting ready to, you may or may not recall that with this council passed us to do funding for the lift station 2. We're going to pull those pumps and pull them over to McElhaney. So we're doing this little tiptoe dance around the capacity issue so we don't overflow. So, and I wish Andrew had it, and I'll ask him to bring it at the next meeting. But if you read the letters from DNR, it talks about the total number of manhole overflows they're reporting. Those are bypasses. If a manhole overflows, forget the wastewater plant, that's considered a bypass by DNR. So you're bypassing treatment. Just want to bring some, what piece of it's the compliance, because this is $36 million. The total package in the master plan was $52 million. So there's a lot of this we're actually going to have to fund through just as we grow in the community. So great job, Andrew.
So as we address some of that infiltration and go along, I mean, that just kind of, we get to count that as capacity?
Yes, sir. Great.
Yeah.
Excellent point. So what happens is, because we're going to build the plant, but then all of a sudden you go from that 2 million additional that happens in a rain event, say you reduce that down by $1 million. Well, if you take that $1 million, multiply it by 6, that's $6 million in today's dollars worth of capacity you've now freed up in your plant. So now if you grow by 1 million gallons a day by your growth and development, so actually, if you'll do it in 2 parts, the city should not be doing a whole lot of capacity improvements unless, well, I shouldn't say that, because we got a lot of developments that are coming in every day. So, but from a capacity, if we'll continue to attack I&I, we should kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone.
Yeah,
so,
and That's a good point with the growth and development and the capacity. That's also kind of a juggle because they're just like anything. The more users we add to our system, the revenue will grow also. So what I would tell you from a utility perspective is where you can concentrate your utilities, it's a win for the city. So think about large commercial users, obviously, multifamily units, things like that where utilities are concentrated. That's a win for us because it's cheap for us to deliver more to them. It's the sprawled out effort that costs us the most money.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Please remember this is a first read, so if you have questions, get with Mr. Nelson or Mr. Cameron before the next meeting.
Call Mr. Nelson.
Call Mr. Nelson. Moving on to item number 13 on our agenda, I need a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 21-21 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Republic, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Greene County and the Greene County Sheriff's Department for law enforcement mutual aid.
Thank you, ma'am. Chief, what are you getting me into?
Not a whole lot, hopefully. And this will be a lot quicker, I promise. But thank you, Mayor. We are seeking approval to enter into a mutual aid agreement with the Greene County Sheriff's Office. If this is approved, the agreement will allow both departments to help each other during an emergency or a disaster situation. And I'd also like to note that this will expire on December 31st of 2024, at which time we would have to draft a new agreement and bring it before City Council at that time for another consideration. So be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Any questions from council? Excellent. Seeing none, please remember this is a first read, so if you have any questions, get with Chief Sells. Moving on to reports from staff. Mr. Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what an awesome day. It was great to get out and vote. Thank you, Mike Landis. This is going to be your last meeting with us, sir. And I'm not going to put it at the very end. I'm going to put it at the very beginning. And so I thank you for coordinating the effort with Fox News, the affiliate I believe you'll be going to work for. But I want to go on record and just publicly state, Mike, that you've been a game changer for the organization and for the community. From every publication to the conversations we've had, all the help you provided me, just personally listening, preparing things, being there with the last ballot measure, through every single detail of coordinating the media, but also just the work you do, the professionalism you bring to the job, the way you present yourself in the community, the times you filled in at the chamber to give the updates, and just people knew you. There's instant recognition, but I think there's just a connection with you, Mike, that'll go far beyond the city, your days at KY3. And you know, while it's sad to lose you, it's also exciting to watch you go back to what you're absolutely skilled completely at and just in your element. And it'll be fun to watch you on the news set again and again, getting the scoop on what's going on in the Republic. We'll be sure to kind of help throw a bone to you too, Ryan. We'll make sure we get the media covered. But but Mike, I just appreciate the work you do, not only as a professional but as a friend. The city's always here for you. Appreciate the work that you've done, but you will be sorely missed, and I appreciate it. I know on behalf of the staff, you just, it's like, hey, you need to get something on Facebook, or hey, you need to respond to this, and you always could handle it. Flying the drone at Have a Blast, flying the drone at Mud Runs, and putting those videos out, the Video of Republic, the billboards. I could go on and on. But Mike, your work and your artistic style and your professionalism has just been incredible, and by far the best PIO I've ever worked with. And so I don't say that lightly. I just say that from the work that you've done and just being around you. So I appreciate your work. I want to say something about the ordinances tonight. We went through a whole lot of them really fast, and those that probably don't watch these meetings very often probably like, do you guys ever talk? Well, you see what happens when we get to talk on ordinances. They go for a long time, but I sometimes think we go through them and people are like, you don't even care about them. We really do. We work on them on the first read. I just appreciate the work of staff, the council, Scott, writing these things. You've taken the time to read them and be prepared to discuss them. But again, I go through these and I sometimes stop and have to say, my gosh, do people understand, truly grasp? It's not that we don't care, that we're just moving through them quickly for the sake of time. It's just I do believe we've done our work and we've prepared and we've discussed it, and it's not trying to suppress it. It's just trying to move through and say, listen, if we don't have to discuss it again, we don't. And so sometimes I think people will miss that. Like, my gosh, if you've been through some of those meetings where they just keep going over it and over it again, it can be pretty challenging. Today at the chamber luncheon, I will say this: the chamber is firing on all cylinders. I said this at the chamber luncheon. Between that, the school district, the city, the momentum, this community is firing on every cylinder that I can think of. Because when you have the business community represented, the city, the schools, and you see just community, sense of community, it's incredible. The momentum we have is now being shared. There's just a synergy between them all. Talking about it, if you've ever been into the Flat Creek side area where it's filled, or the seating area, the side doors, I had a meeting there. We had the meeting there today. At 11:30 it usually starts. Used to between 11:30 and noon, you'd get there, pick a seat. I got there at 11:35 today, and there was about 5 seats left. I mean, it was packed wall to wall, and there's an energy about what's going on, and I appreciate that. But what I shared at the meeting was about transportation. I didn't talk about public safety. I made it clear that was our number one priority, but our second priority was transportation. And sometimes I think we've been working extremely hard with MoDOT. We had another conference call. Garrett Brickner, and Andrew and myself. We were on another call with them last week talking about MM, working all the way from MM to all the way out to ZZ Highway, to how to create that alignment. And we sometimes pass over it, but we have been allocated, or at least programmed, $26 million to improve MM Highway, to redirect that highway to Farm Road 103. We're also working on about a $9 million project from Amazon to I-44. But to see that whole idea of running from I-44 all the way out to ZZ Highway, I want the community to know, it's unfortunate. It's sad to report that in the last 30 days, we've had 2 fatalities on 60 Highway. I know in that one intersection alone, there's been 2 fatalities in the last year. So we're very aware that traffic and the flow of traffic. So this is not something we're just reacting to. We've been working on this actively. We submitted a grant for MM a number of years ago, or I guess a number of years ago. Be careful, I haven't been there that long. But several years ago, we submitted the $25 million grant. We didn't get it. Just so happened through favor, we got $26 million from Amazon out to 60. So that will include a rail overpass and then a signalized intersection. We're working with the developer on the signalized intersection. We're actually working on that property right now. I asked the staff today, how realistic is that property? I'm talking about where our gateway sign is. That property is about to just explode develop-wise. And so that's in addition to the 1,300 lots staff is working on between 21 and 22. So there's just a lot going on with the transportation side. There's a lot of movement. I've spoken with Senator Blunt's office, Congressman Long's office, the governor's office. Representative Davison's been actively working on the situation. Macy's been helping with the chamber. So we're kind of going at it at all fronts as well. But I commend this staff because the idea, and most people don't know this, we love to challenge status quo. But was it Garrett that created the document, the structure? I wish I had the map up here today, but Garrett, 2 years ago, they were like, hey, we got this crazy idea. I think Andrew was scared to give it to me. I'm like, let's go with it. I know it's crazy, but it redirected that flow of that traffic through that area, and that is the route that MoDOT is looking to take. That's the route it's the only route that I can possibly see that they'll take. And that started with our staff. And I love the fact we talk about our 3 priorities are lead and leadership, planning and communication. That's from an administrative perspective. I love the fact that we're leading in these efforts. We're not just waiting for it to happen. We're actually going after it. So I greatly appreciate the work of the staff, and I appreciate that this council and the mayor, you all allow us to do that and present it, and you trust us with that information. And with that, I'm going to yield it back to you, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Can we name it after Garrett?
We can call it the Bricks. Bricktown.
I think
Brickmeister.
we can do something with this. At least a tiny little plaque somewhere, right?
The Garrett bypass.
The Garrett bypass. Just a little plaque.
And if people complain, we'll call it Garrett Brickner Way. And put his address and cell phone number on there. Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you.
And the first adopt the highway will be.
Yeah. Anything from council? Mr. Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to thank Mr. Landis, of course, for everything he's done for Republic. Thank you, Mr. Isett, for coming and introducing yourself this evening. It's great to see our elected officials, even some that we don't get to see all the time. So I really appreciate him taking the time to come down here. Been doing a lot of reflecting the last couple weeks. I appreciate all the transparency, all the conversations we had, the workshops. I feel like I've been through a mini boot camp again for relearning everything Republic. So I love that. I love that. But I would just like to, thank everybody for all of their input and everything that everyone had to say. Thank you, David, Scott, Laura, and all of the staff in the City of Republic do such a great job. I'm really proud to be here and very thankful for the job all of you do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else from council? Well, I think we still have a few minutes of this gorgeous day left. Why don't we get out there and enjoy it? So, yeah. I was trying to excuse them, guys. We're going to go into executive session. I was trying to tell them they could go. Yeah. No further action other than announcing adjournment by the mayor shall take place after an executive session that is scheduled as the last matter on the agenda unless otherwise stated on the agenda or as allowed per RSMO 610.02. Number 1, RSMO 610.021.1, legal actions, causes of actions, or litigation involving a public governmental body and any confidential or privileged communication between a public governmental body or its representatives and its attorneys. Closed session, closed vote, closed record. I need a motion and a second to go into executive session.
Motion.
Second.
We've got a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Dykeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Mitchell, can you unmute yourself? She said aye. Councilmember Franklin.
Aye.
Councilmember Updike.
Aye.
Councilmember Russell.
Aye.
Councilmember Wilson.
Aye.
Councilmember Poole. Councilmember Poole.
Aye.
Councilmember Self.
Aye.
We are now in executive session. Well,